Welcome, Acacia. So very excited to have a conversation with you that I have been dreaming of having for the last year since I came across your work. And so for those who are watching this is Acacea Lewis, and we're going to have a conversation this evening about psilocybin and Acacia's journey into the sacred mushroom, and just a little bit about her and her own personal mythos and mysticism and background. And then we're going to take a little bit of a journey around the conversation of high dose mushroom work, which is something that I am very passionate about. And I've been seeking ways to kind of enter into the sphere, into the community, and be vocal about this, because this is a practice that is quite close to my heart and very central to how I met my husband and our journey together and our evolution together. So it's been a dream and a desire to meet other women who are working with high dose mushrooms and to be inspired and learn and see what advice you have for the community and those who are open to exploring this. So welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. So I'm curious just to know a little bit about your background. I mean, I'm not even sure where in the world you are. I know you're in the States, but a little bit about you and where you are and how you came to be here. It would be a nice place to open.
Yeah, I grew up in North Texas. I was born in Indiana. I live in California, even though I spend a great deal of time in Oaxaca, Mexico, in the cloud forest where the sacred Zapotecora mushroom grows. I live there when I'm not here. So I'm between these two places mostly. A little bit about my background. My background is in astrophysics and geophysics. Academically, I went to college at a very young age because my father was going to community college at a time where I was a preteen. So I got to sit in a lot of college classes that he was taking and eventually apply as a dual credit student and enter the college arena very, very young and do high school and college at the same time. So I was still a teenager. And my mushroom background stems from, I guess you could say, who introduced it to me the first time was Eternal Harmony Gathering crew who saw me in a very depressed state and didn't even tell me that they're going to give me entheogen, but they gave me the mushroom under guidance, and it was able to help break me out of a very toxic cycle I was in at a very critical point of my youth and development. And that's how I got into working with psilocybin mushrooms. Of course, I've always been curious about plant medicine because my mother named me after a plant that has a significant medicine history, even though not in this country.
Wow, beautiful. How old were you when you had this entry experience with psilocybin?
16. I had my most notable experience, my peak experience, I think around my 17th or 18th birthday. That was more life-changing than experiences I had had prior. I will say that at 16, my goals were different than maybe other 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, being in college and learning about plants that were good for nootropics, being in a college environment where there are a lot of people on Adderall and other substances, it makes you think, okay, well, if I don't want to be involved in pharmaceuticals and I don't want to basically become a drug addict, like how can I help improve my mental health and cognitive health naturally? And that was a question I was trying to answer for myself at that time. So I got into studying biohacking pretty young and trying to improve my cognitive awareness.
Were your parents open to entheogens, psychedelics at that time when you started journeying?
I didn't discuss any of it with them. I didn't discuss my relationships really. I didn't really discuss, I really just stayed focused on my studies. I didn't leave college until I ran out of financial aid my senior year because I came in as a transfer student. So right when I was about to go into my senior year of college, I ran out of resources. So I ended up enlisting in the United States military. And during that time, it was a very rocky relationship time between me and my parents. I was in relationships that they didn't really approve of, and I don't really blame them. And so, there wasn't really much communication then. There's a lot more communication now. I help my dad with his chess academy online and do his voiceovers and social media stuff, and he's aware of my medicine journey, and my mother is as well. And they're very supportive.
Beautiful, beautiful journey. So with the coming to these medicines at such a young age and realizing that, peak experience age 17, what has the trajectory been like for you moving from what I'm imagining was kind of a mid-range dose at that age, moving into macro dosing throughout your life? What has that spiral been like?
Well, it wasn't really a spiral. It was really more like a level up in every way and sense. I discovered Kylindi Lyi around, I think I was 17 or 18 when I first came across this work. I'm going to have to think about almost 10 years ago. So yeah, 17, because I'm 27 now. So that's when I think I really first came into contact with his first YouTube videos, 2013, 2014. And I friended him on Facebook, and I didn't say anything to him for a few years because I was like, I'm too young, I don't want to get in trouble for asking about psilocybin, and they find out I'm not even 18 yet, And I had a friend at the time who was teaching me how to grow mushrooms, and he made me make a promise that as long as I never tried any synthetic drugs or any other drugs than natural plant medicine, that he would continue to give it to me because I was suicidally depressed. He felt like it was better than me taking my own life, and I agree with that. I agree with that. And, I see a lot of people who were in my age range, 16, 17-year-olds, out in Berkeley, going through their first experiences, sometimes outdoors, sometimes with a friend, and it helps me reminisce because, this next generation is still going to go full speed ahead, whether or not we prepare them. And so it's really important for us as so-called leaders or facilitators and whatnot to take a load off and really cut to the most meaningful parts of this experience, maybe help them avoid one or two pitfalls. But, the next generation is already probably very much more experienced in psychedelics than a lot of us are who are approaching 30, 40, 50 years old. So just to kind of ground into that, I don't think there's anything wrong at all with getting to know yourself, because it's a process, of growing up. Your brain's not going to stop growing until you're pretty much 26, and it's not going to stop changing ever. So when your brain is developing, for me cognitively, it helped me to sort out my identity and sort out what I thought was important at that time. A lot of things that weren't important. I was working several jobs as a teenager. I was very much supporting in a supporting role in all of my relationships financially. And that's pretty much never changed, through my life. And I feel like I became more tenacious and more independent because of my initial interaction with the psilocybin mushroom, because it taught me that the things that I liked, like collecting rocks and reading hieroglyphics and staring at the night sky, these were things that were not just hobbies, these were ancestral techniques. It took me a really long time to pair my hobbies up with actual meaningful information, but I feel like the mushroom helped me to do that over several years.
Yeah, this is something that I'm very passionate about, my being Irish and coming from an ecology and a land where I feel it is our native medicine, working with psilocybin, and we have indigenous Liberty Cap and Amanita. But the collective memory has been somewhat eradicated, in that there is no oral tradition remaining and there is no written information around the Druids or the pre-Celts or the native Irish working with these medicines. And I'm curious about your experience with this ancestral connection to this medicine and the teachings that that has brought for you.
Well, I want to say something. I'm also part Irish. My mother has celiac disease, and celiac disease, as you know, is a genetic Irish heritage trait, gluten allergy that's very severe. And my partner is also Irish. Both my partners, my first partner was Irish, Scottish, Polish, and Shoshone Native American. And my second partner, my partner who I'm currently blessed to be with, is Irish, Scottish, and Cherokee. And so these are Celtic studies were my first studies. When I first started learning about rocks, I was like maybe 10 years old at the library computer looking up Druidry. I remember signing up for the International Order of Bards and Ovides when I was 10 years old. And I kept it a secret. I didn't say anything. I was learning about what the elements meant. I didn't understand it. It was still a disconnect. But I learned about honoring nature and maiden mother crone. I self-identified as a Wiccan for a long time until I realized I was really more of a Druid. And I have had teachers from Wales. Now I have a Tibetan teacher currently from Wales. And my first teacher, Ian, was a serpent medicine man from Wales. He had traveled to Spain and Peru and Brazil and studied under many people who worked with serpent medicine. And he taught me about the original shining ones, the Shamsu Hor, Hor, not the bad word, Hor, but Shamsu Hor, or the followers of Horus, who were the original Druid priests who fled Egypt and went to Malta. They were identified as being not from Egypt. They weren't Mediterranean, but they were Caucasian, and a lot of them had red hair and slightly elongated skulls. And they were considered the high priests of ancient Egypt, many of them. And they worked notoriously with serpent medicines to cure people of certain illnesses, but also for self-development or evolution. And so, these are different esoteric histories that I'm really interested in studying because they do affect me. Being a Moorish woman, being someone who is connected to the Black Irish and Black Moorish history, even studying the hallucinogenic sea bass of the Celts that is said to give visions of Celtic knots. I feel like very much what you're saying, not only is it a part of our prehistory, it is a part of our modern understanding and reclamation of sacred indigenous arts. I feel very much so that the kente cloth and the Celtic cloth. A friend of mine gave a lecture. I think his name is Ankara. He gave a lecture about Irish mushroom use and the bulbs and hazelnut of wisdom. How they were, how Liberty Caps sometimes taste like hazelnuts, but are found under white birch trees. And Bridget, the white lady, being kind of the guardian of these sacred trees. Now, I want to definitely give credit where credit is due to him for kind of inspiring that area of research in myself. But for me, as someone who is very mixed, I've started to see parallels through all of my ancestral lineages, whether that's Panamanian, Native American, African, Irish, looking at some Northern African, Arab roots specifically. These are all cultures. Some of them don't get along with each other, but if you look far enough back, generally they have some sort of entheogenic connection, which I think is really fascinating. And that's some of the stuff that I like to study and teach about.
Wow. Okay. There's a beautiful overlap there already. My mind and my heart is expanding, saying, wow, I want to know more about these teachers and this serpent medicine. And this is new wisdom for me. So thank you for sharing that. This idea of the mushroom as, a highway into the quantum memory of the planet and the quantum memory of rocks and trees, and just that meeting that we can have with that living library that still exists. I'm curious about your understanding or your experience of moving into the quantum through psilocybin, and how that remembering is for you.
Well, my classes and my teachings all came from my own self exploration and different, I guess you could say, breadcrumbs that were left for me by my teachers, notably Baba Kilindi Lyi and his wives, Kai Wingo and Mama Jindai Lyi. Even though I didn't get a chance to meet either Kai Wingo or Mama Jindai Lyi, getting to hear some of their lectures really inspired me as a young Black woman interested in psychedelics, that it was okay for Black women to high dose. And I planned to go to the first Women in Entheogens conference that Kai Wingo helped organize in Ohio. Of course, we've got one coming up this year, I think, that Mama Ayana Lyi is putting on to honor the legacy of Baba Kilindi and also Kai Wingo and Mama Jindai Lyi, as well as her own legacy and working with psychedelics as a woman. I feel very much so that the quantum experience is not what you'd expect from the word quantum. When you think about quantum, sometimes you think about, oh, little particles going zing, 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 but really it's like my relationship with my teapot. It's your relationship with the earth. It's your relationship with the knowledge stored in the soil. It's your relationship with the plant. It's your ancestors' relationship with that plant being accessible and having this unseen knowledge where you didn't study it in a book, but you feel it in your bones when you come into contact with these specific instruments. And then when you do the research, you're like, oh, this was part of my people's tool set. This is part of my ancestor. Oh, they like this. So because I am embodied in their flesh and blood, my flesh and blood recognizes that beauty or specific information. And then when you start studying the traditions little by little, things start to click that you didn't even know could click, really, until you start walking that path. Something that Baba Kilindi Lyi said, two things: that in Africa, the supernatural and the natural are not separate. All things are natural and supernatural. And another thing is that when we are studying ourselves in the quantum sense, and you start going deeper and deeper and deeper inside of yourself, you get to a place that Baba Kilindi Lyi coined the triple thick darkness. And the triple thick darkness is a place that the Egyptian priests called the Duat. But it's this space that even if it could be light in a room and you're having this experience, it feels very much so as if you could not even see your hand in front of your face, but you're in this womb space or this unmanifest space that is very dark, that you are diving into and accessing the codes to this very reality inside of. And some people call it the workshop. Some people call it, certain renditions of it have been shown as like the temple made of darkness, but is luminous inside of that darkness. And you're feeling it. You're basically in the dark playing with the light, so to speak. But there are messages that come from that underworld space that the ancients have always spoken about, whether it's Hades and Persephone or Osiris and Isis. These stories tell us about this death and rebirth journey and what beings will be encountered on the other side in that experience. And I feel like that's very relevant towards our understanding of the mechanisms at play when we are doing high doses of mushrooms, which we're still learning what a high dose is on many levels, because we are just now testing certain strains to learn how much psilocybin, a milligram per gram, we are ingesting in each gram of mushrooms. So, for example, I did Shiva Lignum 5 grams a week ago, and people would say, "Oh, that's not a high dose. You only did 5 grams. You probably didn't even break through." But when we did the testing, we were able to find out it was 21.9 milligrams per gram psilocybin, compared to Golden Teacher or Loving Teacher, excuse me, which was 3.7 milligrams, or
0.34.
0.34, excuse me. A friend corrected me, 0.34% psilocybin. So that was an order of magnitude of like 5 grams of Shiva Lignum was about equivalent to 30 some odd grams of Loving Teacher. And considering that many people are doing their higher doses from B plus or Golden Teacher, 20 and 30 grams, sometimes if someone were to try, say, 20 grams of a penis envy strain or Shiva Lignum strain, they might be in high dose experiences off of 3 to 5 grams or 7 grams, whereas 10 or 20 grams of some of these more potentized, I guess you could say, species of mushrooms that are psilocybin cubensis mushroom strains. A lot of people used to say the strain doesn't matter in the community. I remember that was the buzzword. Everyone would say, "Oh, well, it doesn't matter if a cube is a cube." But now we're learning not a cube is not just a cube. A cube can be an order of magnitude stronger than another cube. And so that's why it's so important that we learn more about this process.
This is beautiful, and this is really, really relevant information, and something we've been also navigating and understanding how different mushrooms are presenting. And I think that's a very important quality, because each of the strains, for me personally, even creates a different type of hologram or holographic space. The quality of the texture of the journey space changes even in my personal experience, depending on the strain you're working with. Some journeys can be lighter per se, and others can be more of that underworld, especially with something like an albino penis envy. I find it takes you into a deeper space. So the percentage of the psilocin and psilocybin would make sense in regards to that. And are you growing your own medicine, or have you got a community that is growing?
No, but I do receive gifts occasionally. And for me, my focus is on the education side of mushroom work. It's not any way, near, shape, or form on the cultivation side. Years ago, I used to cultivate in New Mexico, and there's a small loophole. If you're not drying mushrooms, you can generally grow the plant itself or the fungi itself without having many issues. But when it comes down to it, the kind of experiences that I really enjoy having are the experiences that either make me feel like I don't know anything at all, or give me a space in order to reframe my perception of this reality. And, I went through my initiation into Tibetan Buddhism under Lama Mike Crowley, the author of Secret Drugs of Buddhism, in December. And part of that reframing is understanding how it is that I can use the power of my voice and mind to enter altered states of consciousness with the intention of benefiting other beings. I think sometimes it's so hard to figure out what is it that we're trying to take away from this experience truly. And some people get stuck in these traps of literally using their experiences to try and make things happen in their reality that maybe are small scale or large scale magic, but aren't really concerned with the benefiting others in their community with their experiences. So, part of our tradition, the Karma Kagyu tradition, is going through the Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana traditions over a series of years of practice and study, so that we can fortify our mental states to be able to withstand higher doses of mushrooms and other entheogens that are utilized in this tradition. and do so respectfully, and do so in a way that allows us to not get stuck in ego traps or create a spiritual persona that detracts away from our ultimate healing and learning.
Yeah, I think this is a big question, because when we are moving into the memory that I think high dose medicine can unlock in terms of the truth of the potential of the human being and the truth of the potential of the human soul and our ability to dive into the mysteries in a way that maybe for a lot of people seems like something that could be in a movie or could be in a book, right? So there is this very real, visceral experience of magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with that is, I would imagine, and it's something that I'm consistently contemplating on and wanting to educate on, especially with the way that spirituality is sort of blooming in the new age community, is around this issue of grandiosity. And I'm curious what your sense is here in terms of the risks, or where you maybe have seen how people can kind of fall into that grandiose space and then entering the world from there.
Can I speak on that real quick? So what's interesting about learning about these different traditions, whether it's African traditional spirituality or Aztec traditional spirituality or Tibetan, you don't need to subscribe to a religion to learn about these. I guess you could say just the understanding of the time. It's not so much the religion that is of interest to me, even though I do have my own belief systems inside of this thing. It's so much what did they get out of it? What did the ancients get out of these ancient experiences? And what metaphors did they leave kind of as a breadcrumb trail to help us to understand in their perspective what it is that the mushroom experience was trying to teach? And one of the best examples that I've found that's kind of funny, it's an interesting metaphor, is the blue amrite or the blue soma, being a Dakini soma that was consumed as a poison of ego, but with the right awareness could be transformed into primordial wisdom itself. And I think that sometimes we go through this turning lead into gold alchemical experience. When we're in the experience, we're shown ourselves, or we're shown our fears and insecurities, so that we can transmute that egoic fear or anger or disgust, aversion into gold, into wisdom. Inside of that experience, I think we're always given kind of a choice what it is that we can take away if we choose to release what it is that we are afraid of. If we decide to either go in scared and go and deal with our fear like the Aztec priests do, let me put it this way, the journey of the deified heart is like another metaphorical example from the Yodotono Mixtec Mayan Codex that Tom Lane writes about, that depicts a young Quetzalcoatl or mushroom initiate eating the mushroom and then going into the underworld to go and contend with death, to cut off the archetypal version of the fear of death so that he can see his brothers and sisters of the mushroom as all being on this great mission to transform themselves into higher warrior priest types to serve their communities. He, at the end of the journey of the deified heart, it shows kind of like a trip report. It goes from right to left, like an upside down U shape. And by the time he peaks on the mushroom, he sees the oneness in everything. You can tell because there's people of all colors depicted in the Mayan codice holding a mushroom to their mouth, kind of just insinuating, okay, these are all my brothers and sisters who are peaceful. And it shows him going through like this really upside down lake where he's got his feet in the air. Literally, it's like being sucked back into this reality. And he has to make decisions to make changes in his life to rebalance himself, and then comes back into the form of the two-faced Quetzalcoatl where he's being completely present. And I think a lot of times the mushroom is trying to teach you to be completely present in this moment now, And when you are present, there are many studies that show that it can ultimately help with depression through being more mindful and making better decisions in the long run. And I think that that's a really big takeaway that a lot of people can get from it.
Yeah, beautiful. What is your sense of, I mean, I'm curious, women that, in the wider world that are navigating in this way, because I know when I started working, or well, journeying with high doses, which was upon the kind of invitation from my partner who had been doing this for maybe 15 years before we even met. And for me, it was a very novel way of considering to journey with the mushroom. And then I think it was after my first kind of high entry dose was about 13 grams of an albino penis envy. And my experience was changed everything about how I understood myself and my healing. And I watched Kylindi's a workshop by Kylindi on YouTube and thought, oh my goodness, are there other women in the world doing this? And it's always been something that I'm so curious and passionate about knowing.
So can I speak on that real quick? So there is a community of women who, are moms who do high doses and, who are not as well. It seems like a minority of women who are younger, but there are a few of us. I can think of a handful that I know personally who do high doses. But ultimately, there are the learning of what a woman is, the learning of what a female body is, and not in so much of the physical material that we have female parts or sometimes female energy, but how it is that we are initiated and brought into the systems of our grandmothers and mothers, and what it is the responsibility as a woman to heal for our lineage and 7 generations behind us. A lot of men don't have these experiences where they are confronted with sexual trauma from generations behind them, or it takes many, many, many decades before that feminine side of ancestral divination is revealed. For me, it was at high dose experiencing when I cracked my head on the ice when I fell as a kid doing ice skating. I was about maybe 7 years old or 8 years old. I had an experience where I died in the trip as a 5-year-old, and it showed me my choices, how I chose my parents, how I chose to come into this incarnation, how my life was already really over. Time doesn't really exist at all. And I was watching my life play out like this two-faced Quetzalcoatl, like this metaphor that I was telling you about, past, present, and future all at the same time in this trip. And I remember falling asleep in the ice and like quantumly remembering my great 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 grandparents dying in like the last ice age, and how they all froze with their stones in their hand, and how they had to make a decision to never let go of the technology that held their information and held their secrets. And it was this, I was in multiple dimensions at the same time, watching myself die and be reborn and choose life and choose this incarnation to come back and share information. And as a woman in that experience, seeing Osset, seeing Bastet, seeing Sekhmet, seeing Isis, and choosing to remember these movements, these sacred movements, that when I open up my arms in a certain way, I could see, like I could feel the energy coming out of my hands and the crown on my head and my regalia. I could feel it all. So real, and seeing myself as a divine being, so real in those experiences, taught me about self-respect and self-honor. For me, when it comes to talking to other women about high dosing on mushrooms, it is such a deep journey, especially when you do the mushrooms on your moon. If you are on your period and you're dealing with blood, many people could not handle seeing blood on 20 or 30 grams of mushrooms. I've been on my period on 20 and 30 grams of mushrooms, and it's been very raw feeling experience. You're in that primordial state of blood and sacrifice, and coming into contact with your own DNA and smelling, the blood in your veins, rushing and then honoring that process within yourself. It can be very grotesque at times, but you're always confronted with the idea of death and dying. And when you go through that process, eyes open, unafraid, standing in your power and feminine divinity, the benefits of that for your psyche overall, if you've been feeling like you're not enough, or you've been feeling like, you are absolutely, I guess you could say, incapable of moving forward, that willpower, can help ricochet you from a very dark place into a higher divine consciousness where you are committed to serving the divine within yourself and the divine within others and your community in a sacred way. And I feel like that can help pull a lot of our sisters out of depression, for sure.
Yeah. When you are moving into these types of space, are you generally working indoors? Do you work outside, or what's your, or a bit of both?
For high dose work, I generally work inside, and I generally work in the dark at night. There are night workers and day workers. Like, I've done, maximum 16 grams outside. I haven't gone 20 and 30 grams outside just because, you're so sensitive to energy, at those higher doses, that you may encounter things in your environment that maybe didn't seem toxic or problematic before, even frequencies. And you walk out your door and you feel very vulnerable, kind of like a newborn in this environment. And you may hear and see things that could, cause you to have a very difficult experience that are just present in your reality, like maybe a homeless person overdosing on fentanyl. Whereas before you could just shut your ears off, but now if you're on a high dose of mushrooms and you see a homeless person suffering, you're going to either maybe try to help that person on a high dose, which may not be a safe idea, or you might try to drive to the store and buy brisket and grapefruit juice. I've done that on 14 grams. Wasn't safe. I got stopped by a cop. I didn't get in trouble, but that's really just like some mushroom magic right there, so don't leave the house, I recommend, on higher doses unless you're in a area that's like a private forest reserve that you know very well, and you're dressed properly and you have people who are sober there to watch you and to make sure that you don't go jumping off a cliff or climbing a tree or impaling yourself on a rock.
Or your body's okay when you leave it.
Yeah, or your body's okay when you leave it, like my friend said. So
Yeah. With that, with working, say, potentially working in a nature reserve space, because we do most of our high dose work outdoors at night, but in the desert. And I'm curious what your sense is in terms of etheric beings in the areas. Like, do you feel that being indoors in your own contained space is safer on an etheric level?
Well, okay, so that's a different paradigm. I've done a high dose, like 9 grams, and wachuma at the beach and at the state park in Maumee Bay in Ohio, and we met beings and entities outdoors on that beach that came and relayed messages about, I guess you could say, just kind of our star family and different work that we were doing in this plane. And it was very important. And when you're in the desert, that's a completely different type of situation. Unless you're around a bunch of cactus, there's something intrinsically mystical and mystic about going to the desert and working with peyote or working with wachuma and the mushroom. And I would say, as long as you have people there who are watchers and you're very experienced, that it's more safe than being in a mountain forest environment trying to do the same thing, because there are less predators. Of course, you're going to deal with snakes in the desert, but there's something about the desert illuminating the moonlight illuminating the sand. It's almost this bright darkness. It's almost like being in daytime at night on a high dose, I've found. And I've gotten a lot out of it in the past. I used to live in Tucson and work in the desert out there near Sabino Canyon. And the experiences I had there are unlike any experiences I've had anywhere else in the world working with mushrooms.
What is your sense? I mean, this is a little conversation we had before we came on the call, which was around the monetization, I suppose, of curating spaces for individuals to go through high dose work. And what's your feeling on the accessibility of this, and for people that are, you know, looking to journey into this way? Do they need a guide?
Oh, wow. So, okay, my friend here, we work together, you know, all of us, and he's gone through crunching the numbers as far as what the milligrams of psilocybin would be for a 13-gram ape experience, like you mentioned previously. Apparently, that would be about 72.2 grams of Thai.
Look at the sheet number.
Yeah, we actually have the sheet number here, so you can see it here. I'll just rotate the camera. I don't know if it's going to let me. Here, let me see here if I can show you this. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see.
So Shiva would be like 2 or 3 grams.
So Shiva Lignum would be about 2 or 3 grams, and Trinity, Ghost, Golden Teacher. So 13 grams of ape would be about 30 grams of Golden Teacher.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting to know. And this is interesting to know. Wow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So going back to your actual question, though, before I went off on that small tangent, I think that's the harm of monetization, is that until we actually have some sort of, I guess you could say, better understanding of, you know, what it is that is in a chocolate bar or in a gummy or in a microdose capsule, I think that monetization of the mushroom is a terrible idea, actually, because it insinuates that we all have the same information about strains, which we do not. And it can be very misleading when you try to go to a company to purchase synthetic mushrooms or mushrooms that have been marketed in a certain kind of way. It can be very, very misleading if you're trying to get a therapeutic experience and all of a sudden they try a new strain out and you're in a high dose arena, or potentially you're looking for a high dose and you end up not being even able to break through because it's not the correct strain and the correct dosage. So not only that, I think that people who are not honoring the traditions, or at least conscious of the traditional use of the mushroom as a tool, shouldn't be really monetizing and selling them to make money without at least having a simple awareness of what the practical utilization of it really was to our ancestors. Whether it's our Irish ancestors, Russian ancestors, Siberian ancestors, African ancestors, whatever tradition they are connected to, I think because the mushroom is so old, if you are a human being on this planet, there is a tradition that has utilized entheogens that you are connected to, even if you're not conscious of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And being the connection to studying astrophysics, has that brought an interesting dimension for you in terms of your comprehension?
Yes, yeah, because the Dogon ancestors and the Egyptian ancestors, even in modern times in Africa, in many places in the Middle East, and even Mexico, astrology and astronomy and entheogens have always been linked. And part of what I didn't like about studying astrophysics in a laboratory is that I never got out to look at the night sky. We'd always be looking at pictures from our telescopes and trying to guess what these star formations are, basically based on the magnitude of light coming from the star. So the magnitude was measured in a certain kind of way. So we'd see these curvy line graphs and try to match them up. Is this a pulsating binary variable star? Is this a variable star, depending on how much light it emits? And that was fun, but I feel like the mushroom took it up to a whole new level. Because to me, understanding how the heavenly bodies affect the human body was more important information to me than what kind of star is it and can we get a good picture of it. Understanding that because we are made of stardust, we are literally quantumly entangled with the birth of the solar system. And on some level, you can go back and witness the birth of this solar system because that information is permanently imprinted on you as a child of this planet. That's special to me.
Yeah. And this is the technology that is available to us when we're open to it.
Yes, absolutely. You know, that's special, I think. A lot of people would say, oh, that's just metaphysics. And I would have said the same thing years ago, like, oh, you get to see the birth of a solar system. That's just your subconscious mind imprinting. And now, as I've gotten older and more experienced with this, there's no way fathomable that we don't even have computer graphics to generate the kind of visions that the mushroom can produce at high dose. There's no technology available, I believe, on this planet to fully simulate that kind of experience on that big of a scale. I think that just shows us how the technology is so built to work with our brains that when it binds to a certain set of receptors that control learning and memory, it can teach us literally on a cellular level who we are and where we're from firsthand without having to use a laboratory or a large hadron collider to explain to us what a particle of energy is. It can take us into the particle and demonstrate for us the awareness of that particle and how it relates to us in this vast array of consciousness.
So this begs the question. I've had this posed to me on a few occasions when I've brought up the conversation of higher dose journey work, and people will say, and again, it tying into, let's just use golden teachers as a kind of a standard psilocybin dosage, because for me that would be kind of the standard one that my community and a lot of people I know would be working with. When someone says that they can have that level of experience on 3 or 4 grams of golden teachers, right?
I think that that's projecting. I don't really think that people should make the mistake of being overzealous to compare their experiences to others. Even with my experiences, I'm not going to say that you didn't go high enough or deep enough or that you went too far and that you shouldn't have done the dose that you have based on my experience, because any judgment that I make on your experience is just a reflection of my own experiences. So I should be very, very cautious about using my wealth of experience to try and judge your experience, because you have a completely different, I guess you could say, life. You have a completely different, you're an individual. It's not right for me to project onto your experience what you did or didn't do enough of or too much of, because it's very much a personal journey. When you go to Oaxaca, Mexico, there's not this drug culture of grams involved. You go to a grandmother's house and she gives you fresh harvested mushrooms that she does not weigh. She takes a look at you and she takes a look at the mushrooms, and if the mushrooms tell her it's for you, it's for you. And you sit there, you say, thank you, grandmother, thank you, abuela, and she'll make you some hot chocolate, send you to your cabin on the left, and you're going to have the experience of a lifetime. And if you had waited and said, oh, well, I did 250 wet grams, and someone said, oh, well, that's only approximately 20 grams, you couldn't have had that experience, then that takes away from it. It's this kind of drug culture that I feel like makes it so, I guess you could say, uncomfortable at times discussing high doses, because I feel like the higher dose experiences are intrinsically connected to the tradition of eating the mushroom as food versus as a drug. And there's a difference between food of the gods and a pharmaceutical always. So if we treat it as a food of the gods, if we treat it as food for our spirit and food for our higher self and food to connect with God on a personal level, then I don't really understand why we need to necessarily just isolate it 2 grams. I think because we dry them, it makes it more confusing. But when they're fresh harvested, we pick the mushroom 2 by 2 in Oaxaca, and we connect with each mushroom. So you might get to 4 mushrooms and just stop, because that's all the ones that you found and that's all that called to you. It's really, really, really hard in the wild to find a a whole ounce of mushrooms if you're hunting and foraging for mushrooms. I've gone out on the side of the cliff, 3 hours out in the Santa Maria Oxtlatepeque in San Jose del Pacifico, Mexico. And the mushrooms don't grow in the town. So we go to this undisclosed location that's on a mountain where people, if they had to walk from that mountain into town, it would take them almost 4 or 5 days. So it's so remote and so secluded. Once you get out there, you're literally on a landslide of slippery rocks, trying to crawl up the cliff to try and pick the mushrooms out of between the rocks inside of the cliff. So each one you have this reverence for. And because you have this reverence for it, you don't want to pick one that's too small, because you know that if you do that, then you're going to limit its reproduction cycle. So without having that type of culture like involved where you can just get like a whole grip of mushrooms, I think that intimidates people. And so automatically they want to say, well, safety first. I wouldn't do over 5 grams. You must be doing too much if you're doing more than that. I think that just speaks to the way that our culture has come to view drugs in general, but has very little, it reflects very small on the experience, because of course, what if that was golden teacher? That is a mushroom that has so much less psilocybin than maybe say an ape or penis envy or melmac or MVP, that when it comes to someone saying, well, if you had some good mushrooms, you'd only need 4 grams of it. Maybe they were talking about Shiva lignum, but even then it's still stabbing in the dark, and it's kind of judgy, and it's not really healthy, I don't feel like.
Yeah, it reminds me of working with the Liberty Cap in Ireland, especially in season when we can go picking and we have this beautiful wealth of fresh mushrooms, and how each year different seasons will produce a different strength of mushroom, which is always interesting, and how you really can't navigate. I've had experiences with what could be considered, I don't know what the gram was, but that was stronger than a higher dose that I've had with a different mushroom, because it's wild. It has a completely unique intellect and different way of working, and there is no quantifying it.
Yes, absolutely. And I feel the same way about Oaxaca. Oaxaca is the only place I've actually gone mushroom hunting. I would love to go and visit Ireland, and go visit with the Liberty Caps. I've heard so many beautiful things, but in Oaxaca, there's 28 different species that grow at all different times of the season. And so we have everything from Hoogshagany to Zapotecorum to Aztecorum sometimes shows up in different regions and different cloud forests. And we have Neoxylopensis in Veracruz. We have so many different types that many people have never even heard of. And the indigenous people say, okay, well, there's 150 varieties of mushrooms that grow in this forest, but we don't have names for them. We just know them by texture, size, color, trip, or taste. We have some that taste like queso. We have others that taste like lobster, and I feel like when you're out there in the cloud forest, you're really at the mercy of the environment. And, you are really you're going there with the intention of giving offerings. And if if it feels inviting to take the mushroom, you take the mushroom, but you're going to get some signs if you've gone too far and you've taken too much. And I think that that's something special that in the West, we don't necessarily get the privilege of having the experience of sometimes.
And with that, I mean, that knowing that you can experience when you are in the mountains, and the communication, the idea of safety, because I know this is probably a question for a lot of people, and something that I'm wanting to even understand how to better communicate it myself, in terms of how safe is it for us to be experimenting in this sort of range of ingesting of psilocybin?
Well, the RD50 is close to a pound of mushrooms for most people at an average strength of mushrooms. And for me personally, 430 odd grams is not going to fit in my stomach. It has a really, really, really high RD50. And even with the higher potency mushrooms, you still be looking at like at least half a kilo or, 1 pound or half a pound, even at the max strength that we've ever found in mushrooms. And I think that Kylindi Lyi made it very clear when he said the protocol for high dosing is starting at 3 grams, 5 grams, 7 grams, 9 grams. If you do that stepping technique with one strain, not just skipping strains, but with one strain, then you can find out where you start having issues, like maybe not remembering your trips as well, or maybe having physical feelings. If you really pay attention to your body and you don't push the envelope too hard and too fast, then you get to know the mushroom gets to know you, and you get to determine how safe it is. If you feel very uncomfortable, then you can go back down and dose and maybe take a long break until you feel like it's the right time for you to come back into that space. And I think that as long as people are responsible, just like with alcohol or even really harmful substances, as long as we are really responsible about our use and don't abuse it and we don't take it every day, we put at least 3 to 4 weeks in between each trip so that our bodies can reset, so that we can reintegrate. I think that as long as people stay with that, it can be very beneficial.
For you personally, in your experiences, have you had, I mean, you mentioned about the dance and that kind of experience of remembering memory through movement. And I'm curious, have you ever had any very intense physical experiences on the medicine?
Yes. Yeah, I felt like my bones were breaking and my jaw was broken and my back was breaking. And I felt like my body was going through this transformation and evolution. And it's a trip, and I can't explain it. Like physically, I can't explain what happened to me. It was very painful, but once it was over, I noticed that I could pronounce words better. I noticed that my posture was better. I noticed that my whole facial structure has changed. Like if you go back on Instagram, you look at me from 2015, I don't look like the same person. And it's not just because I got older, like my parents say, it's like, oh yeah, our daughter changed like 3 different times. Like we noticed like you changed physically, on a drastic scale. And so with that, I would say, be careful what you ask for. If your prayer is to evolve and to heal, don't expect it to be a comfortable experience. Embrace the discomfort of being uncomfortable while you are healing, because whoever it is that you want to become, it is that you want to become, the sacrifice or the price that you pay is who you are right now. And even if it feels like you're dying, trust that it is like a 1.00001 chance that you're actually physically dying. The mushroom wouldn't have done it. Maybe the alcohol or the other drugs that you took could have done it. But if you fasted and you are respectful, then it's probably just you transforming, and it's probably just time for you to surrender and let go and breathe through that process and be mindful. And it'll be over soon. But you can't get off of the roller coaster, so don't try to escape yet. Just surrender. It's going to be okay.
With that, I have one more kind of key question, which is, I'm wondering, do you have spontaneous languages coming through you when you're in medicine?
Now, like my last trip, it was spontaneous Tibetan, and Tibetan's a hard language because the words have so much meaning and depth of meaning, even inside of the seed syllables. One seed syllable, like a simple word like Om, has so much esoteric meaning down to the Dharmakaya truth body itself of the Buddha's mind. And so if you start glossolalia in the middle of a mushroom trip, whether it's you think it's Sumerian or Egyptian or Hindu, allow it. Hold space for it. It's there for a reason. And I've had trips where I had no glossolalia for a year, 2 years, and then all of a sudden, boom, it was just all this energy erupting and forming into sounds that felt ancient, that felt healing. And one part of me wanted to be embarrassed about it, but the other part of me felt so released and relieved that I still remembered and that it was still a part of me. And I feel like that's why it's so important to spend time alone with the mushroom as well, is because when you are in spaces and ceremony with multiple other people, you do have to be mindful of how your glossolalia is going to impact the space and be respectful to other people's experiences. So I would say, yeah, I definitely have.
Have you any recommendations in terms of traditions that you have found personally really supported you in terms of balancing the ego and also balancing the body to prepare for these journeys?
I would recommend Mike Crowley's, Lama Mike Crowley. His Tibetan name is Lama Karma Tenzin Dorje. He's my personal Lama. He's writing a book, Psychedelic Buddhism, that you can pre-order. That's one tradition where I've had an elder step out of, I guess you could say, a higher position to really just provide support and guidance to me on my journey and really take me back to the basics of my meditation practice and my mindfulness practice. I've had elders who are Zapotec, especially, and who study Aztec philosophy, really provide support. Even Taoist, I've had Taoist elders who understand the tradition of mushrooms use as it affects Taoist history. Really helped me to understand balance and fullness and simplicity. And even my tea master, who's like one of my best friends, like even though she doesn't work with the psilocybin mushroom, I've found that working with tea and tea culture has really helped me to learn what it means to be present. And that is something that is a hugely valuable experience, So yes, I've had many teachers, even, I would say that Baba Kilindi Lyi, I have to mention him the most because when I traveled to meet him in 2018, he really took me under his wing and asked me to speak and share my story at the Detroit Entheogenic conferences. And he provided like one-on-one support. Like I call him almost every first weekend of the month when it was time for us to do our high doses. And he let me tell him all about the details. I turned into a cat lady. I looked in the mirror and I had a tail and fangs. Oh my God, what do I do? It's like, we need more warriors. Like he was there for me at so many steps, like critical moments in my life. Even when I miscarried a child, it was my first miscarriage. And I didn't really even at that point, like see him as a figure who was, I guess you could say, like famous or like a powerful figure. He was really just the old mushroom guy for a really long time, just talking on Facebook about mushrooms. We all appreciated his wisdom, but now, over the years, like I have just so much gratitude in my heart for the support that he showed me. And, it's really encouraged me to support others who have come to me asking for information or asking for instructions. He was famous for being short answered, or I guess you could say he was a man of little words. He was very stoic. So sometimes I would ask him about sorcery or magic or whatnot, and he'd say, look internally for answers. Something like that, kind of cryptic, or he'd leave me little hints, but I liked that he didn't give me the answer or try to explain things to me because it made me want to look for myself. And I'm so glad that he didn't try to imprint like what he thought reality was on me. He was interested in hearing what I thought, and he was very good listener. I'm not him. I'm not that good of a listener. I don't have as much patience, nowhere near. And but those are some elders who have really stepped into my life in a really positive way. Native American elders, Uncle Jesse, I just came out of Sweat Lodge with him yesterday. And the Native American Aztec Sundance tradition, peyote medicine has been a really grounding and healing agent, because if you go to a sweat lodge, and you're coming in ego, then you're going to get some powerful lessons that teach you, you're not perfect. We fall down and we get back up, and that's what it's about. This is not about being the perfect divine figure. You're going to have some darkness inside, and you're going to need to pray it out and sing it out and heal it out, but we're here to support each other. And that grounding energy has really left a really powerful impact on me. So it's all of it.
Wow. Thank you so much, Acacea. Thank you so much for taking the time to share all of this wisdom. And I'm inspired and I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing a little bit of your journey. I wish we could talk more later, because I feel like I really want to hear more about you and your husband's experiences and journeys. And
yeah, we'll have
so
tea.
thank you.
We'll have a tea ceremony.
That would be amazing. I would absolutely love that.